It's working, right. So, Happy New Year. A bit late in January to wish everyone that, but never mind. So this is the Audit Committee of Northumberland County Council. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. I think we have a full house, is that right?
We have no apologies submitted, Chair.
Right.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I've got Councillor Wallace, Alex Wallace, he's just sent me a text, he's not well.
Right. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
And Councillor Jackson's not here, is it? Right, okay. But we are quorate.
You are quorate.
We are quorate. Good, right. So we have the minutes of the meeting of the 27th of November, and I'm not proposing to go through them page by page. I'm just going to invite, if there are any points of factual correction that anyone wants to bring up. Otherwise, I'm going to assume that we're content with those. Do I have agreement that they're a true record? Yep, thank you. Disclosure of members' interests. And Mr. Gerrard is here to advise if there are any queries. Yeah, yeah. Right. No declarations of interest.
Apparently not.
Apparently not. Right, we shall see. Right. Okay. So the first substantive item is the pensions report. So this is the Fire and Rescue Service report. And just to remind members that there is a pensions committee which has its own governance, but under the constitution of the council, that report needs to come to the audit committee. And I think Simon, isn't it? Yes, you're presenting this item. Right. So do you want to very briefly just present it? We don't need a lot, but just give us a context.
Yeah, of course. So as mentioned, Fire Pensions has its own committee, the local pension board, and part of that governance is to present an annual report to the audit committee. The report covers a lot of different data and information in terms of, I'll just whiz through it actually, the attendance of the members and who's been attending. It highlights the purpose of the board and there's different areas that it needs to look at. Mainly looks at identifying risks for the audit committee. It gives a progress. So at the moment, the main progress items are McLeod Sergeant, which is the age discrimination remedy. There's the Matthews project exercise, which is for retained members, and that project, and then working on dashboards with the pension administrator. It provides the data scores that the administrator calculates for, and those data scores are over 90%. Details what training has been carried out by the members and any risks. What we have noticed is the pension board currently doesn't have a risk register, and part of the work over the next year will be development of risk registers that are put in place. And then the main key areas for the future is looking into the Matthews exercise to get that implemented and moving, and make sure McLeod and Sergeants effectively rolled out.
Thank you. Is Matthews going to be as complicated as McLeod?
Yes, so Matthews was originally intended to end on the 31st of March 25,
Right.
and it's currently January 25 and the progress has been limited. There is a consultation out from the Home Office which is seeking to extend it by 12 months to March 26. But yes, it's equally fraught with complications.
Right.
Because effectively people can buy pensions back to when they first started and retained, and that could be for some people into the late 60s or 70s, and therefore data is not obviously readily at hand.
Okay. Any questions to Mr. Long on fire and rescue pensions? Dr. Green.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I note that the admin services in respect of administration are provided by on a shared service basis by West Yorkshire
Yes.
Pension Fund. What work do we do to make sure that the level of that service is as we would expect? In the report, it does touch upon the increase in clients taken on by West Yorkshire as part of that shared service arrangement. So yeah, how do we monitor their performance? What's our level of confidence that they're providing the admin services that we would anticipate?
Yes, so on a monthly basis we receive a client report from West Yorkshire that details the work that they've been doing and where they meet with the KPIs. On a quarterly basis we'll have a client meeting where we'll go through any issues that we'll have. West Yorkshire, yeah, so West Yorkshire has, I think, effectively 23 fire clients or something along those lines. I think the next one is LPPA that have 5 and XPS that have 3. So it is a very limited pot of people. This year for administrators, there have been breaches in terms of ABS has not been delivered, but that's been across the fire sector as a whole, as opposed to specifically one administrator not performing well. It's just been, for want of a better phrase, a very difficult year for fire pensions. But there is monitoring in place in terms of KPIs and monthly reports.
Right.
Can I do a follow-up? Because I was going to ask that. I think Stuart's already asked the question. My question was a similar one. I noticed why do we use Bradford or West Yorkshire? Why are they the pensions administrator? I don't quite understand that.
Yeah. So I think it'll probably be about 2016, 2017. West Yorkshire did take on a lot of fire clients from other neighbouring FOAs. The fire pensions is effectively small in comparison to the LGPS. Its complexity is incredibly hard, probably tenfold in comparison to other pension schemes. West Yorkshire have that knowledge in-house. I think originally it was done by Northumberland in-house, but with staff turnover, it just wasn't able to be kept there. So,
I see. Right.
like Tyne where I came from, our Sunderland Council used to be our leading authority. As care schemes came in, it became more complex and people went out to procurement, and West Yorkshire at that time probably seen good business and did hoover up a lot of FOAs. But it's illustrated because they've got 23. It wasn't just Northumberland who came to that same conclusion. There was another 20 odd FOAs who went, we can no longer do this in-house because of the complexity, and West Yorkshire had the resources to take on the clients.
Right. Okay, that's great. Thanks for clearing that up.
Okay. Right. Just back, I just noticed, I mean, I asked about Matthews, but there's a reference to this needing to be taken forward with some urgency. Are you happy that the arrangements that are in place supporting the board are there to progress with some urgency?
Yes, we're looking at additional resources to increase the capacity of how it's going to be a resource going forward so we can move forward. So that's something that I've got kind of on my desk as the high priority, high risk of making sure that's progressed. But it is working with Chief Fire Officer Binning and Jan Willis, the Section 151 officer. So it is being highlighted and it is being looked at how it can be resourced. And luckily enough, there's been an extension of 12 months, otherwise the risk would have been even higher.
Okay. Right. Because I'm assuming in somewhere like Northumberland, retained firefighters are quite important.
Yes. I think we've identified somewhere in the region between 350 and 400 people who are affected.
Yeah.
So yes, there's a lot of members that need to be resolved. Some of them retired, some of them in the 70s, who are due a pension that isn't currently in payment.
Okay, right. So, committee, we're just being asked to receive the annual report from the Pensions Board, provide some comments, which we've done. So can we agree the recommendations and let Simon get on with his busy afternoon? Yeah, agreed. Right, you're very welcome to stay, but if you have other things to do, thank you. Right. So we move to item 5, and this is the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000. Is it pronounced Riper or Reaper? Ripper.
Ripper.
Right, no, okay. Right. Who's going to take us forward on this?
I'll introduce it if I may, Chair, and then I'll ask my colleague, Lisa Bishop, to
Yeah.
answer any questions. Members will probably recall that this comes every year. It's the policy, and we have to review it annually. It was refreshed last year. There are no substantial changes this year, and I think the report also indicates that there have been no applications under the legislation. At one level, you might think that's a good thing, but I think at another level, I think it does raise some questions about, are we using all the tools that we have available? As I was saying to the Chair before the meeting started, I think part of the problem with RIPA, as it's colloquially known, is that it got a bit of a bad press initially. There were also, you may recall, all sorts of media stories about people putting tags on bins and all sorts, covert cameras on recycling. And it frightened a lot of people off. And I think in Northumberland, particularly, the services that might have availed themselves of it were quite small niche services, and I think the expertise wasn't available. Under the Council's BEST programme, we have actually undertaken a major review of all of our regulatory services, and they are being amalgamated into a larger team, which will give resilience and indeed economies of scale. We would be looking, and Lisa can answer questions on this if people have any. We would hope that actually they can take a more constructive look at the legislation and see whether there are opportunities to use it for obviously the public benefit. I think that's all I've got to say, really, Chair.
Thank you. Right. Questions for Lisa? Yeah.
You realise my phone's going to ring now, don't you? Anyway, I'm glad I read the report before I started reading the policy, because at 6 it tells us that we can't change any of it anyway. So, when we do this, would it be possible just to save a forest or two, just to have the policy online and just say, if you want to read it, this is where you go to? Because, as I say, you read it and then you get to 6 and it says, well, there's nothing you can do about it anyway. You've got to adopt it. You can't really, when you say review it, it's not really reviewing it, is it? You've got to read it and think, well, yeah, that's all right. We can't change any of it. So I think the audit committee's approach, if possible, should be different next year to the proper job that you've done this year.
I think the expectation is next year we will be reducing that, because of the enforcement review and the changes to regulatory services. There may be a change to the senior responsible officer, and it's certainly the plan of myself and other officers who deal with RIPA to reduce the size of the policy to make it far easier to understand, and perhaps then roll out more of a guidance note for officers to take the fear away from using RIPA, because it is, as you've already identified, a very clear statutory process with statutory codes of practice that we have to follow. And I think that has brought a lot of concern to officers, that there is a fear. So we're rolling out training programs, we're looking to reduce the policy, create a more user-friendly, officer-friendly guidance note moving forward, and that will hopefully, when we come back to Audit Committee next year, we may have some RIPA activity to report, and we may have changes for you which may be of more benefit for the committee.
Just to come back, Chair, yeah, I don't mind how long it is, how complicated it is. I just don't think we should be regurgitating it in this report.
Yes, it's very easy to put the policy on now.
I think it's a simple note saying this is what the council has to do, and you have to review it. Well, the audit committee can't review it. And I take the fact that you're having a different approach next year, so that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
I think Mr. Gerald wants to come in.
I think you make a good point, and we are hoping to move in the next municipal year to a more online approach to documents and publication anyway. So I think going forward, it will be a link to a document on the website.
Right, I think we have Councillor Dale and then Councillor Oliver.
Yeah, thank you. Just to say thank you for the report, and it always comes up every year, but it is actually interesting. But I do note that people are not using it's not being used, and I think that is probably the initial problem, is that, as you said, with BEST, etc., there's more use that could be made, or not more use could be made of it, because there's so many things going on that actually, if staff felt that they could use the resources and be happy using them and feel that they actually need to use them and it's there, I think that would be very helpful, because there are lots of things I know where, you know, this type of surveillance would help and to actually enact and make things happen quicker as well.
I think the difficulty is there are very strict tests of necessity, proportionality and criminality.
Yeah.
So the offending has to reach a certain level. For example, it needs to carry a custodial sentence of 6 months. And these were the changes that were brought in following a lot of the bad publicity about Ripper. The idea moving forward is that all officers would in essence be looking at, if they're looking at using any covert surveillance or directed surveillance techniques, we want to put in place a very clear and robust system so that if Ripper applies, then they know which processes to take. If it doesn't fall under Ripper, we would say that we still need necessity, proportionality. So we would be looking for similar checks and balances, but this is all about training. And a fear during COVID, and where obviously officers changed the way that they were working, a lot of the knowledge, expertise and experience of Ripper has dwindled, and that's why we're trying to roll out training programs and trying to make the process easier moving forward.
Thank you.
Councillor Oliver.
I was going to ask a very similar question, but I just, if I can sort of, you know, Stephen mentioned there's potentially a missed opportunity, and we've got a report coming this afternoon to the Communities in Place Scrutiny Committee about the BEST review and community protection and so on. But what sort of areas is it, or could it be a missed opportunity in? I mean, you've mentioned the threshold, but are we talking about sort of fly tipping, animal abuse? That, you know, what sort of areas might it be used in?
At the moment, fly tipping is predominantly dealt with by the use of overt cameras, which have signage, and it is my team that deals with the fly tipping prosecutions, and they are coming through by use of the overt CCTV. In theory, it could be used for any type of offending, fraud investigations, trading standards investigations, some elements of perhaps serious serial fly tippers as opposed to the opportunists who come into the back lane. So there are opportunities for it to be used, and that's why, as I say, we are trying to bring it back to the council, to officers, to say these are tools that you can use and potentially you should be using.
Okay. So does that mean, just to have interest, those signs that say "fly tippers, we are watching you"?
Yes.
That's the overt.
That's overt, yes.
Right. Oh, okay. I was. Right.
The overt part is very important because that doesn't then fall into
Then
Ripper.
it doesn't fall into it. Right. Okay.
Thank you. Just getting back onto that, and it's the prosecution side. It's all well and good, you know, reporting and officers participating, but it's the element of getting to court and help with the cost. So I don't know how you're going to make it cost effective to get more prosecutions, you know, in order to say this is what's going to happen to you. You know, because I think some of them just take advantage of the law present because they know for whatever reason I'm not going to get there because it costs too much.
There's a high-profile campaign at the moment being run by the council with regards to fly tipping. I don't know if you've seen the hazard tape and everything else around. It is my team that deals with all of the prosecutions and other avenues that are open. Fixed penalty notices are being offered, and we do take prosecutions to court. We take them to court successfully. The issues that you're referring to, unfortunately, are out of our hands, so to speak, and isn't really relevant for Ripper, but that's down to magistrates' sentencing powers and people's means when they get to court. It certainly doesn't stop us as a council taking people to court.
Could I just come back to Yes, I get that, but I think that's probably why a lot of these people are flouting the law, because perhaps if you put the you know, the fly tip and fines up, you know, so it's a higher level, because obviously there's a lot, it's a lot to get there, and a lot of time of your good selves, and you know, and think, well, this is not worthwhile doing it now because it's costing me too much to basically say serial offenders, and they're terrible.
The fly tipping fixed penalties are at the maximum for the council. They were put up last year. With regards to fines that are issued by the court, that is outside of the council's control. Fines are determined by the sentencing guidelines council fines calculator, and if you attend at court as a serial fly tipper with an assumed income of £120, that's what the magistrates will base the fine on. However, fly tipping does carry a custodial sentence, and it is unfortunately down to the magistrates and the district judges as to which penalties they impose. What I can say is both myself and my colleagues always put fly tipping in the highest bands. It's then unfortunately down to the magistrates.
Thank you, Chair. I totally get it, but it's so sad, as I say, because your hands are tied.
I'm always very happy to talk about this outside of this forum. You can probably tell this is something that I am very passionate about, so if anybody would like to talk to me about these prosecutions, etc., I'm very happy to do so.
Okay, right. So, committee, we won't stray into, as you say, fly tipping too much. So what we've got from this discussion is listening to Councillor Reid's frustration. He's got a commitment that we'll put some of this online and streamline it, which is helpful. I think as a committee, and as Councillor Oliver has pointed out, you know, there's some material coming through other committees, but we would very much support the council's endeavours to make this a power that officers can use sensibly rather than not use it at all, which has been the case for the last 5 years.
At least,
At least, right. Okay. Anything else? We're invited, given the restrictions that the Home Office have placed on this, we're just invited to agree the recommendations.
Approve the policy and
Approve
continue
the
to
policy.
monitor the use of the policy.
Right. Approve the policy that the Home Office have decided. Right. Agreed. Right.
Is it not up to the full council to agree policy?
I'll take advice on that one. Mr. Jarrell?
not in this case. This is in a sense an operational policy relating to a particular piece of legislation. So it does actually fall to the audit committee. Yeah.
Although it's enabling the council to take action against perpetrators. So it is actually. But sorry, I'm into this phase of my life where I definitely want to know how many angels are dancing on the heads of the pin. So I do apologise, and I'll try and contain myself.
Right. Okay. We're moving on.
This is going to partner.
Right. Yes. Yes. Thank you very much. Okay. Right. So we come on to 3 agenda items where, is it Jan or Chris, are you going to take these forward?
Jan, do you want me to do? I can do all 3, Jan, if you want.
So this is the statement of accounts, changes to the code of practice, and the treasury management strategy. Obviously, we'll have a pause between each one, but they are all together in a way.
Yes, Chair, I'm happy for Chris to present the reports, and I'll come in if you need me to.
Yeah, happy with that.
Okay, right.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so certainly the first 2 reports are linked. So the first one, it probably would have actually been better having them the other way around, but on the agenda, but it doesn't really matter. So the first report we've got is, and these are all annual reports to audit committee, so you'll be familiar with these. The first one is the timetable and policies in relation to the statement of accounts for 24-25. Members will be aware that there's been a backlog of audits over the past few years.
This is a national backlog.
National backlog, yes.
Yeah.
In an attempt to sort of remedy that, the government has introduced a series of backstop dates, which again you'll be aware of. So the backstop date for 24-25 is the 27th of February. That is when we will need to have the final accounts audited and signed off. And then those backstop dates reduce over the next few years to try and get in line with a normal sort of reporting timetable. There is actually an extension to the publication of the draft statement of accounts date, which has been 31st of May for the past few years. That's been pushed back to the 30th of June. Internally, we are still working towards the 31st of May production of the accounts, but obviously we will have statutorily until the 30th to publish. Accounting policies as well, that's also covered in here. So just one thing to note on that, you'll see there's a summary at the back. There's no change to any policies other than for leases, and that policy will actually be brought back. It's still being finalised, so that the changes for leases around IFRS 16 has been ongoing for a while. Coming in for, you could early adopt, but coming in for 24-25. So we will be bringing that one back to the March Audit Committee. But so all of the policies that are in here today are unchanged. And you can see that we are in line with the code on all of them. So I think that was it on that first report.
Right. Councillor Dale?
Just to ask you, you know, long discussions about valuation of highways, etc., infrastructure. Is that in here, or is that in a previous list of changes? Because that was a change, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was a statutory override put in place for that.
There is, and there's no changes yet, and they're looking, that's still for another year, so there's nothing
So it's
changing
not
in
in
that
this one.
respect.
No, that's fine. It's just I didn't know we discussed it in detail. I thought, well,
Just the leases is the real change.
It's not coming to next. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other queries on? So this is just the timetabling and the policies.
Timetable and the policies that we'll use in the production of the 24-25 accounts. And those policies are really in relation to the Code of Practice. So the updated Code of Practice for 24-25, that's actually the next report. So we'll discuss what I'll come on to that next, but yeah, so these are the policies that we'll use for 24-25.
Right, so so as a committee we're agreeing those recommendations. Yep.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, agreed, thank you. Stuart.
Sorry, Chair, thank you. Yeah, it's just by way of the timetable, if I may. I mean, clearly this is a high-level timetable. The detail, Chris, will lie elsewhere, clearly. It's not a point, Chair, that's particular to Northumberland, nor indeed Forvis Mazars, but experience elsewhere, experience of working with other external audit firms, suggests that the critical tasks within our plan might well involve tasks that are outside of our control, i.e. Forvis Mazars will need to complete those tasks. Just wondering, Chris, the nature of the communication that you've had to date by way of putting that plan together, how mindful you are. I know we're due an external audit update later, Chair, but how mindful are we of the risks here of needing to have some of these tasks completed by a third party?
Yeah, so obviously Mazars will produce their audit strategy memorandum, which will lay out the sort of their plan for the audit for 24-25. So yeah, that's right. We'll be working to a timetable between the council and Forvis Mazars in order to produce the accounts. So we have internally more detailed timetable that's shared with officers and key staff, obviously, so that we'll ensure that we complete the tasks that we need to in order to publish the accounts on time. Like I say, we have got that bit of a buffer in terms of the draft accounts that we've got that month. We're going to be sort of producing early this year, but there will be another audit strategy memorandum. I can't remember when that one's coming, Diane. Do you know when that one's coming to audit committee?
The April.
April. So we'll get the audit memorandum in April.
Okay. Diane, do you want to offer any further assurance on this point?
Just a quick point, if I may, Chair. One of the complexities is getting the assurance from the pension fund auditor where we don't directly audit it. And the pension fund auditor, we're working on they are similarly bringing forward their timetable like we have been, and it's something that we'll work together with the Directors of Finances, the Section 151 officers in the North East. And it was earlier this year, we received it at the end of November 24. The prior year it had been, I think, in the January or the February, so it is coming forward slowly, and hopefully this year we hope to get it sooner, and then they bring back their timetable at the same time as we are. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just add one more point on that as well? Another sort of external bit of information that we're waiting for the accounts, you'll recall, is to do with valuations. That's one of the key ones, really. And we have had those sort of been tight in previous years. This year was better, and so we will be on track. But obviously we do rely on external valuers to provide that. But if things go as they have this year, we should have that in plenty of time for the production of the accounts.
Okay. Stuart, are you reasonably assured?
I'm Chair, thank you. Insofar clearly as we can be. Things happen, don't they, Chair, as we know, but yes, I do have assurance that officers and indeed external audit colleagues are across the issues. Thank you.
Okay, so as a committee we're agreeing those the recommendations in the reports, and then we're moving to the changes of the code of practice?
Yes, that's right. So this next report I alluded to earlier, this one is just sort of updating members on the changes to the code of practice. And there's very little really other than, there's one substantial change which I mentioned, which is the leases one. There's an appendix at the back which details the changes, and obviously you can see where they're relevant to the council. The first one is the substantial change, which we have known about for a while, but it impacts quite a few sections throughout the code. So that's the main change. The other bits are sort of amendments to narrative reporting and sort of minor changes that don't really impact the policies, just minor code changes. So just to really draw members' attention to that and just to note the changes.
Okay. So we're simply noting the changes. No discussion on this one needed. Okay, we're agreeing that. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Reid. Right. And then 6.3 or 6.C, depending on which bit of the papers you're reading. So this is the Treasury Management Strategy Statement. Chris, over to you.
Yes, so this again is an annual policy or statement that comes to Audit Committee, so members will be familiar with it. The Treasury Management Strategy Statement, which it encompasses a few sort of statements, strategies and policies. So namely, we've got the Treasury Management Policy Statement in there, we've got an annual investment strategy, an annual borrowing strategy, updated prudential indicators and the MRP policy. Audit Committee required to scrutinise this policy and then make recommendations that County Council approve the policy. So what we've got sort of in here, it's quite a substantial report. I'll not go through it in detail. I'll just sort of draw attention to some key bits and also where we've had changes from the previous year. There hasn't been many changes. It's largely unchanged from 24-25, but I will, from 24-25, but I will draw attention where it has changed slightly. So we've got in there the forecast borrowing position and sort of economic forecasts, and you'll be aware that we use external Treasury advisors as well, to sort of assist us with our Treasury management strategy and sort of forecasts. So there's some economic forecast in there, sort of interest rate forecasts which are expected to come down over the next couple of years, and that sort of impacts our borrowing strategy. So the borrowing strategy in there is, like I said, largely unchanged. The emphasis will be on continuing to utilise internal borrowing, so that's sort of using cash reserves in lieu of external borrowing. The reason for that is that it's actually more cost effective to do that at the moment because of interest rates. So in there it mentions 17% internal borrowing for our capital finance requirement. So we'll use internal cash balances in 25-26 as far as possible, but there will still be a requirement for some external borrowing, estimated to be to the tune of 135 million in 25-26. The better value in terms of borrowing is expected to be at the shorter term. So we will be primarily using short-term borrowing of up to 1 to 2 years. We could do longer term if there's opportunities, but that will be the sort of strategy in terms of borrowing. For investment strategy, again, largely unchanged. We've up in consultation with Link, we've updated the targeted rates for investments, but other than that, largely unchanged. The objectives for council investments will always be security, liquidity, and then yield. And so we do try and get the best return on our investments, but never at the expense of security and liquidity. They're always the two main objectives of any investment that the council does. So it mentions the type of investment and the counterparty list, so the organisations who the council can invest with. Again, they're both unchanged. And in here it does mention the non-treasury management investments, so they are, you'll be familiar with, within the capital programme we have loans that we provide to third parties. They are to sort of further service and council objectives. They're not part of core treasury management, so they're mentioned in the investment strategy, but they're actually dealt with another capital strategy. Prudential indicators, we have updated these for the sort of new capital programme, which will be going to County Council in February. Worth just drawing attention that we have introduced a local indicator in relation to finance and cost to net revenue stream. That's to do with a change in the code, but also just to really give a more useful indicator for Northumberland, because you'll recall that we have within our interest. So really, this indicator looks at finance and costs. So you know the cost of finance and compared to net revenue stream, which is council tax and grants and things like that. We have within our finance and costs related to those third-party loans that I just mentioned there, to sort of partner organisations such as Advance, NHS Foundation Trust. We receive interest on those, so what the local indicator does, it actually adds back the interest that we receive on those loans. So it's more meaningful to the council really, because we haven't, that's sort of separate to our treasury management strategy. And just as well worth noting that on that indicator, you'll see a change in years 23, 24 and 25, 26. That relates to the reversal of voluntary MRP that was set aside. So that's why you can see a change in between those years. We've also got a supplementary indicator, which I mentioned about, which shows the level of internal borrowing. It's currently 17%, but that's expected to reduce over the sort of medium term down to 12%. So that's the investment strategy. On MRP, this one's unchanged other than what I alluded to earlier, which is the IFRS 16 leases change. So something's been included for that. The policy regarding leases, so just to update members, so previously operating leases would just go through the income and expenditure account and sort of no impact on the balance sheet. They'll now be on balance sheet and they will be subject to MRP. The policy that we will have is that the charge to revenue will match what the charge would have been before IFRS 16. So effectively the MRP charge will be equal to what the operating lease charge would have been. And capital strategy we've got, which is unchanged. Strategy just supports the delivery of the priorities for the council and also sets out the process for appraising projects for their inclusion within the capital programme, and that's unchanged as well. And again, we've got a lot of sort of treasury management practices on there, which is how we sort of deliver the capital strategy. They're unchanged other than one amendment to the inflation bit in section 1.5.1. That's the only change in the TMPs. So that's all I was going to say on that, really, but happy to take any questions.
Okay. Right, members, there's a lot to take in there. I was just going to, while we're just gathering our thoughts, Jan, I think last time we had one of these tour of the horizon discussions, you gave us some forecasts. I just wondered if you wanted to come in at this point and add anything to Chris's helpful explanations.
So I think you're probably referring to some fairly general comments I made at the last time about the potential impact of changes in the US administration. Again, I think we're just waiting for the dust to settle. I think what is clear is that there's potential for some really significant changes in sort of like the macroeconomic environment. And we will need to keep our treasury management strategy under review as, it becomes clearer what the direction of travel is going to be. And I probably can't say anything more than that at this stage. It's just having a watching brief. But there is the potential, for some significant shifts in the coming year, and we will need to be quite agile in terms of how we respond to those, as always.
As always. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Oliver first.
First comment is I'm glad Jan thinks the dust might settle in the US. But just two questions. One about the accounting treatment of the leases. Basically, I think I understood you, it's not going to have any impact on funding available to spend on council services. No, it's just moving it to the balance sheet and there'll be a sort of equal charge.
We'll just recognise the assets and liabilities related to the lease on the balance sheet. The revenue impact will be the same.
Brilliant. Okay. And then and I'm not expecting an answer on this now because it's a very specific question, but a few years ago during COVID, there was a restructuring of the debt with Newcastle Airport. And I just wondered if we could have an update on that at some point, and has that restructuring unwound and
it is
etc.
unwinding that one. It is unwinding, but I'll provide an update on where we're at with that one.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chris. When you say you'll provide an update at some point, not now.
Yeah, because we are receiving the missed payments back from that, and we're putting them back into a reserve because we sort of used that reserve to smooth the lost interest over the MTFP when it originally happened. Right. So we're replenishing that, but I can send a written response on where we're actually at with that.
That would be helpful. Okay.
Yes, can I just ask you, thank you, just one or two things. First of all, yes, the loan from the loan to the NHS actually helps funds the revenue because of the. Does anybody remember when we did that? It was yes, because it was a PFI that we helped, but it was getting too costly for Hexham Hospital. So we did a loan, and actually it's helped Hexham actually grow because of that. Not having to pay such a higher interest on their PFI. So it's good news, so it's not all, it's helping other people outside. The other thing is, ages ago, and I always remember, because I remember the dates thinking, that's when that happened, was we used to have a list of when the actual capital project had actually been fully funded or was no longer, there was no borrowing on it any longer. And I can't remember what the date was, but I remember when I came on, I think it was something like 1947. So I think it attributes to the length of the borrowing over a long period of time before it gets paid back. I don't know where we are with that, but I think it would be quite interesting to know where the bottom line is. I mean, it must have gone sort of since 1940, it must be up to 1955 by now, or 60, I don't know, but something like that. But be quite, because I think it's interesting that people don't actually understand the long-term borrowing that we are agreeing.
Yeah.
And to go with that, when you go looking at the capital projects evaluation priority scheme, is actually the length and therefore the value for money over that period of time.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of sort of the borrowing to fund the capital programme, it mentions the capital financing requirements. That's what that is, the underlying need to borrow. So it's where we haven't been able to use capital receipts or grants or whatever to finance capital expenditure. So that's what effectively we're funding from borrowing. Now, that will never disappear, the capital finance. It'll always be there. You'll always have that.
Yes, absolutely.
But you just need to set a prudent level of repayment in your revenue budget each year. But we've got sort of the movement of that capital finance requirement as detailed within here. And obviously that depends on the size of the capital programme, the grants available, external funding, capital receipts, and obviously the MRP that would charge to revenue each year. So it is sort of laid out the movement in that capital finance requirement over the medium term.
Right. No, I just think it's interesting because people forget that it's not short term, it's how
Yes,
long
there's a
it
revenue
is.
impact.
And I've actually seen some projects which were funded have actually not been paid off, but they've had to take it down and renew it. So, you know, there's all kinds of things that happen, but it is something we're in there and we have to manage it.
Yeah, and that's what it mentions in the MRP policy as well, where you sort of use the asset life method,
Yes,
so
yeah.
so we sort of repayment is matched over the useful economic life of the asset.
Thank you very much.
Any, Jim?
Yeah, I just want to check I'm reading that table right on page 120. Do we lend money to Newcastle City Council? That was my question. Have I misunderstood?
Yes, these are third-party loans, yeah, loans to third parties, these ones.
So we lend money, why does Northumberland lend to Newcastle? That's really what I was asking.
I don't know what that individual one is for, but I can find out.
I was just curious. I wondered if it's because we're better off than Newcastle.
So these ones are the ones where it's loans to third parties, to sort of the non-core treasury ones. So we do have inter-authority borrowing into the part of the core treasury. So some councils might have, not as much now, but there used to be in the past, councils would lend and borrow between each other. That's not this. This is to do with, this is the non-sort of treasury management loans, if you like. So this will be to support the capital programme. So I don't know specifically off the top of my head what that is for, but it will be for a scheme, a scheme in conjunction with the council.
Right. Do we need you to clarify that at some point?
Would you like us to come back and confirm what that one's for?
I think.
No, I was more interested in
Just
case it
in
was a
general.
case of, because we were so healthy in our budget, we could lend out to Newcastle, but it's not the case.
No, that's
It's
not
complicated.
that. No.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to go Councillor Reid and then Dr. Green.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I just wanted to put on record my thanks and appreciation of the people who do this, because, you know, regardless of the political ups and downs of the council and regardless of what's gone on, this is the engine room of the council, and God knows how they do it, but they do a brilliant job. And so long as internal audit are happy that it's properly looked after and administered, and there's nothing, you know, I'm not going to use any derogatory term at all, but so long as they're happy, then I'm happy. And really, you read these reports and they're just, you know, I don't have the intellectual capacity to cope with all of this. So thank you very much. Well done, and keep up the good work, because the council will be here in 100 years' time because of the work that you lot do. It's brilliant. And as Councillor Dale says, that, you know, you'll be taking out loans next year, in 100 years' time, this organisation will still be, you know, will have paid it all off and will have built the thing that it was borrowed for. And, you know, just keep going and just keep employing the brilliant people that you do, and we'll all be fine.
Right. And I think, Andrea, the whole committee would endorse what Councillor Reid has just said. So, as a vote of thanks.
Chair, thank you. Yes, this is a very, very technical area, isn't it? It's a great credit to the officers involved in producing a report like this, Councillor Reid, and keeping across it day to day. Yeah, indeed. Capital financing requirement, which I understand this is our underlying need to borrow to sustain the non-current asset base and so on. Now, the operational boundary, Chris, if I may, that's our own soft cap on borrowing. Is that correct?
It is.
Now,
yeah.
Again, this may be, Councillor Reid, my lack of understanding of this area. In 2028, and I appreciate this is all your forecast at this point, clearly, the CFR exceeds the operational boundary. So as I understand it, do correct me, Chris, if I've got this wrong, our underlying need to borrow appears to be greater than our own soft cap on borrowing. I'm looking at the CFR 2028 is on page 163, and the operational boundary for the same year is just on page 165. Now, should should that be of concern, Chris? Why would we be forecasting that our underlying need to borrow would exceed our own soft cap on borrowing?
Are you talking about the operational boundary?
Yeah, so on page 163 I've got the CFR, Chris, and then the operational boundary for external debt is on page 165. Are those figures linked, connected in any way?
So there's two limits in here. And they're both. We don't really expect to overshoot the first one, which is the authorised limit. And in terms of, just to give some context on that one, for 24-25 the limit was 1487, and the actual in the last update was 822 million. So a long way.
Yeah, it's way short. Yeah.
So yeah. This really sort of shows where we need to borrow in advance of need, so really where we might need to put borrowing in place before some of that borrowing ends. So it just gives us the ability to be able to do that without having to wait for some to be repaid. We can actually borrow before we repay that. So wouldn't expect to overshoot that one.
Okay.
The next one does say that it's just a guide only, maybe breached or undershot without any significant concern on that one. For the operational boundary, but I'll double check on the specifics on that year why it is more. But like I say, there is no concern if we do go over that. But I'll come back on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Can I just ask that, obviously the change in the government, but whatever government's in power, is obviously treasury management, etc., and how interest rates go up and down, and etc. I presume that will have an impact on your figures, or is this what you think is going to happen?
Sorry, can you just say that one again? I was just
Sorry, sorry about that. I was just asking, included in this is the based on what the interest rates might be, etc., etc. So it's all the whole treasury management. And is this where you expect us to be, or is it just careful management?
Yeah, so obviously we've got interest rates forecasting, but we are, as I mentioned, in terms of borrowing, we're expecting to use internal borrowing as much as we can. So there will be a need to do some external borrowing. I think we're planning to do some before the end of this financial year as well, and we'll need to do some next year, but they'll be on a short-term basis. And obviously they'll be at the forecast sort of rates as they stand now. There is some volatility in there, but we will have a sort of target rate that we'll try and get. So yes, based on rates that they are now, we'll try and minimise the need for external borrowing, but we'll have to do some. That's why we're going to take the strategy will be to take sort of a number of small short-term loans rather than potentially a bigger shorter-term or bigger longer-term loan. There will be a number of smaller sort of borrowing.
So can I just go back? So going into the capital project evaluation priority, that will be key to actually borrowing in some way?
Are you talking about the prioritisation of the projects now?
Well, it's the evaluation of them.
Yeah, so when services submit proposals for capital projects, and we will score them against the criteria laid out in there. Obviously, we want to try and minimise borrowing as much as possible, so schemes that attract external funding will be given a greater sort of weight, and then obviously where we do need to borrow, they'll be scored against the strategic fit, and how they sort of contribute towards the corporate priorities.
Okay.
Right. Committee. Right. So we've spanned far and wide on this one. We've gone from the 1940s to a century in the future. But, so we've got two specific points where, Chris, if you can give us something back by email, one of which is to do with the airport.
Yes.
And the other one is
the operational boundary.
The operational boundaries, yeah. Other than that, now we've considered the report, and we're recommending that the County Council approves the Treasury Management Strategy and the capital prudential indicators and the annual minimum revenue provision
Yes.
policy statement. Are we content to do that?
So they will all go as part of the budget papers that go in February. Yeah.
Right. Okay, council, committee, we're happy? Thank you. Now, we've got corporate risk management and corporate fraud. Kevin, are you going to do both of those, or is it? Right, okay. Right, so corporate risk management update. Just to remind committee members that there is some more detailed information on the pink papers at the back, but I think what we would all prefer to do is to not have to go into closed session and have the debate on the risks in open session. So just put a little caveat there. Okay, Kevin, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as committee are aware, we bring this report to you twice a year. Once we've undertaken our reviews of corporate risks, so that you can be assured over that process as part of your terms of reference. So when we last reviewed the corporate risks in July, we had 11 risks which were managed at the corporate level. We've now undertaken the latest review in accordance with the executive management team and cabinet portfolio holders, and that was agreed by cabinet on the 14th of January. We still have the 11 corporate risks from July, and all of the 11 are still there, but there is only one where there was a change in risk score, which was risk 11, which related to the Social Housing Regulations Act 2023, and that score came down from a C2 to a D2. There were other risks where there were changes in circumstances or changes in control, but they were not deemed sufficient enough to alter the risk score. So that updated risk register was agreed by Cabinet earlier this month, as I say, and when we then bring that report to Cabinet in full to you as Audit Committee for you to be assured over that process. As the Chair's alluded to, one of those appendices was a pink exempt report, and it is again today, but in line with the Chair's words, happy to take any questions from the committee.
These are risks that we don't hold these risks. The county council holds the risk, and so the accountability responsibility rests not with the audit committee, but with, in this case, cabinet. Yeah. But Councillor Dale.
Yes, can I just go, thank you very much, Sir Risk, and obviously I'm not going on to the pink paper, I'll read that in detail later, I've read it. I just wanted to go through the risk description and go on to number 5. High profile capital projects. I'm all right on that one?
Let's see how we progress. Go on, Dan.
Sorry, mine's not on pink paper, so I just presumed it wasn't part of the pink paper, so.
Go on, keep going. If I think we're straying, then Mr. Gerard will come in.
Sorry, what I sent to the Chair was, I think it's important to stick to role. The role of this committee is to review the process and to ensure that we have a robust system for managing risk as an authority and not to be complacent. It's not to go into the individual risk. There's a real, and I don't want to say no, but I think there's a risk that people look at an individual risk and get interested in it. Your job is not to go into that, is all I'm saying.
What I'm trying to say, what I would like to say is that under high profile capital projects, that there should be an added risk in there. Under it's again, I'm not sure. So NEP, Northumberland Line and Energising Blythe, I think there should be another risk under that one.
Right. So
you better give me permission to speak or not.
No. Councillor Dale, so if I can play that back to you, think that the risks associated with the evaluation of capital projects is such that should have a
should be more inclusive. I could say it should be more inclusive.
Right. I think that's a fair comment, which, you know, Kevin, you can consider in terms of your advice to the Cabinet.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think all I can say is obviously on this risk we had the Executive Director of Place and Regeneration came and gave the update he did in September. All I can do is take your comments back to the risk owners for them to consider. It's their risk, so happily take that comment back, Councillor Dale. It would be for the Executive Director and the Councillor Wearmouth in this case to consider that as part of their risk that they own.
So if I spoke to you afterwards and informed you what I think should be also included in that risk, and I think it should actually be quite in the public domain, actually, to be quite honest, from all the background and everything else that's gone on, I think it is missing. So anyway, I can say that I'm looking at this. I haven't got the assurance I require that all risks are being managed, but that is only from my point of view.
Right. And Councillor Dale, if you remember, we had the presentation from the risk owner. Yes, it was September, wasn't it? And he gave us chapter and verse on his approach to managing that risk, and I thought we had a pretty helpful and wide-ranging discussion. Right. Councillor Oliver.
If I just make a comment that might give Councillor Dale some reassurance, is that the risks listed on page 193 are IE, and you know the actual. But reading through the pink bit, without going into any detail, it's quite clear that the scope of the risk management of that particular risk is any high-value capital project. So hopefully, what Councillor Dale is talking about will turn out to already being sort of monitored and risk managed.
Yeah. I don't agree with that. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Right. Councillor Reid.
You see, we're all arguing about angels on heads of pins now, aren't we? Thanks for that. It's not just me. The easiest and simplest way of solving this problem is put EG instead of IE. Yes. Isn't it? I mean, you know, because IE is specifically those things and EG is examples of. So, you know, that would ease Councillor Dale's problem, I'm sure.
I'm going to leave it with the officers to consider the helpful suggestion from Councillor Reid. Right.
Chair?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I can comment now because a bit of this is on the pink paper.
If it's on the pink, then let's leave that till we go into the closed session.
All right. Because it is a comment on a particular risk. It was just as
let's leave that. I mean, the purpose of this session is, as Mr. Jarrard has reminded us, is that we need to be satisfied that the council has a robust risk management strategy. From the papers that we've had the opportunity to read and the brief discussion we've had, we're reasonably assured that that process is in place. And what Councillor Dale's suggestion about maybe some additional scaffolding is something that, Kevin, you will play back to the risk owner. Yeah. Any further discussion on this? Right. What are we being invited to do on this one? Kevin, what do we need to do?
Chair, this is just for you to note and consider as part of meeting your remit in terms of having oversight of the risk management arrangements. Yep. So it's the process concluded with the Cabinet in January, so it's brought to you to note and consider as part of your ongoing consideration of the governance framework.
Right. And we've noted and we've had a discussion. We've considered. Right. Members of the committee, we're going to move on to fraud. Now, I know, Councillor Sesford, you were particularly interested in this last year, so I'm hoping for a lively contribution. Right. And just to remind committee that we had an online briefing discussion of the approach to fraud, which, Amy, you did it, yes. and it was very helpful. So who's going to take us through this? Maybe.
That would be me. Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you. It's good to hear that it went down. That was well received, the fraud awareness session that we did. So the report I'm bringing today is our interim report, which covers the corporate fraud work carried out between the 1st of April and the 30th of September 2024. It's the same report that we'll bring every 6 months, so will look very familiar, with the addition of just a little bit of comparison, which we've put in the table at 4.6, just to give you some comparable data about where we are this year compared to where we were last year, which was requested at a previous audit committee. Council tax remains the largest area that we'll look at, which you'll see at the chart at 4.5, accounts for just over 70% of the investigations that we carry out. It's not necessarily 70% of the work that we do, because some investigations can be more prolonged, but it's 70% with regards to turnover and volume of referrals and cases that we'll look at, or with council tax, and tenancy and housing fraud being the next one at around 18%. The results from that are shown at the next table at 4.6, which will show you the figures that we report from those various referrals that we'll get, which are there for you to consider. Sanction information is there. You will note, again, we've put some comparison data on there. There has been a small drop in the number of sanctions that we report. A lot of that is a direct result of the new blue badge process that were implemented and I discussed at the last audit committee, and I've mentioned again in this report, whereby we've introduced an additional an initial warning for blue badge misuse, rather than going straight to a criminal for sort of the lower level type of offender. We've introduced a warning which will be issued along with the fixed penalty, the penalty notice, as an additional warning, and we'll discuss the matter with both the person, the offender, and the blue badge holder to try and work as a preventative measure to stop the misuse, rather than just dealing with the actual misuse. We've also moved on more to work with preventative measures, and as you know, we did a fraud awareness session with yourselves. We've done a lot more fraud awareness sessions with other various different specific teams within the council as well, which seems to have gone down well. And that has had a positive impact as well on the referrals that we receive from them teams and the working relationship that we have with the staff in their teams, which then has a more positive impact on the success of the investigations. Which you'll notice, I think for the first time in this report, we've reported on a grant, a £15,000 grant, and that's down to the work that we're doing with the climate change team and the warmer homes grants that are available as well. So hopefully we'll see a bit more of that. The work that we're doing, the single person discount review, that continues and is currently being signed off up to the summer of this year, so we'll continue with that work and we'll review what will happen with that moving forward. We're also doing some work with the housing waiting list, so no doubt you'll have heard a lot of press about the housing crisis that we're in. We've looked at our own housing register and the levels that are on our own home finder waiting list. So we're looking at doing some work with that to try and reduce the numbers and remove any applications that aren't entirely truthful or where changes haven't been declared, so that we'll make sure that the right people with the right information are hitting the top of the housing waiting list and being allocated the very much needed social housing properties that we'll have available. So there's a little bit of information about that at 4.17, 4.18. We're very much in the early stages of this work. We've only looked so far at a very small sample of the housing waiting list, concentrating on the ones at the top of the list, so the more high priority ones, which makes sense because they're the ones that are going to be more likely to be offered properties. You'll see that of the 18 investigations that were closed during this reporting period, of those 18, 13 applications were removed from the housing list as a result of the investigations carried out. So it's quite a significant chunk of the sample that we're looking at. So we will continue with that work. And I think that's probably all the comments, Chair. I would invite any questions.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Amy. Councillor Dale.
So just very quickly, you've got the COVID-19 relief funding on the bottom of page 201, which achieved 2002 September to 2020, £10,000. Since the new government is lengthening the period of time when investigations can take place, or I think they've made for HMRC, whatever, but does that allow you to have a look more closely if the time limit has been extended?
Yeah, so there is still some ongoing work with regards to the debt that was raised as a part of the investigations and ongoing work with that. And there is, I think we've still got one, possibly two new cases to have to look into. And a lot of it lies on the business race liability at the time. So we'll have to look into all of that first as well. But yes, there is some residual work that is ongoing. Whether or not it'll identify any additional debt, I don't know.
Are you getting any information from the government on that in particular?
I don't know that would come directly to me.
No,
I haven't had anything. I haven't had anything come directly to me. It more likely would go, I would think, to revenues and benefits.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much for all this, because the amount of work, and I remember when this was started, this board, I remember Alan Marinell, when it started going back a long time ago, and the value it's added to the council is tremendous. So I think it's really good, and thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Grimshaw.
Thank you. It isn't a question, it's a comment, but I am delighted on 4.18 with the home finder and the people who are on the waiting list and high priority, because I think that's an out of the numbers, that's amazing, you know, because, you know, and my colleagues in this room as well, and the wider colleagues we've got in the county, are dealing on probably a daily basis with issues around trying to find a home for people. So now identifying people who are, for whatever reason, are doing these things, it's absolutely amazing work that you're doing. So thank you very, very much for that, because there are some heartbreaking cases that perhaps, and I don't know if there's still some slips through the net or you've got your finger on the pulse, but it would be great to think that you had. Thank you very much.
Lynn, is that the Home Finder project you're talking about?
It certainly
Yes,
is, Chair.
Yes, yeah. No, so Amy, are you using, when it says you're using data matching technology, is that AI or
No, not quite that.
Not yet.
Not yet. No, we've got a data matching system within the fraud department, which it's the same data matching system we use for the single person discount review.
Okay.
And we're just using that to run some more.
Right.
I think in the past we've used it for doing data matches on school applications. Obviously the single person discount, now home finder, and hopefully we'll use it for more in the future.
Good. Okay. Councillor Reid and then Stuart.
Thanks. I'm just looking at the right to buy, right to acquire. Is that 494,700 actual money, or is it kind of money that if we hadn't intervened we would have lost? Do you see what I mean?
So the figure that we report on with the right to buy is the actual discount that was offered on the property. So that's the amount of discount that would have been.
Yeah, so
the value of the discount reduced off the purchase price should we have sold the property.
Yeah, but so that's kind of it's virtual then, isn't it? It's not
emotional,
actual.
Yeah.
It's not actual money. It's the fact we've stopped somebody getting.
That's right.
A discount. So
yeah.
It's just the total at the bottom. I realise that it's right, but if we're sorry, I was going to use the word imaginary, and it's not. It's not what I mean, but. You know, it's not. We haven't actually seen that amount of money because 494,700 was because we stopped something.
It was saved,
rather than,
yeah. So there's there's like a cashable and a notional, and we'll work with both.
That's the word.
It's a notional.
Notional. Thank
so that,
you.
Yeah, the right to
Thank
buy
you.
figures that will record on the system are recorded as notional figures.
Yeah.
Whereas likes of a single person discount over payment would be recorded as cashable.
Actual. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. And can I just ask about the single person discount too?
Mm-hmm.
I'm astonished at how much we get back from chasing people. But then, the people, as far as I remember, the single person discount is applied to an enormous percentage of the houses. I mean, is it 40-odd%?
Yeah,
Something like that? I mean, that is 40-odd% of the houses in Northumberland are claiming single person discount. I mean, that is, you know, it's a lot. So just keep up that work. And I'm sure quite a lot of it is people, you know, get new partners and all the rest of it. And the last thing on the mind is, oh, I've got to get the council tax right, you know. So I'm sure people are not, when the system catches up with them, I'm sure people aren't too offended by the fact that they owe some money. I hope not, anyway. And what you might want to look at the council tax next time is the amount now that we've doubled on empty homes and we're charging more for holiday homes. You might just want to start looking at that, because there will be money there, absolutely. And again, people will not realise that they've got to pay or whatever. So I would just bear that in mind, and I would stick that in that column next year. Thank you for your indulgence, Chair.
Right. Okay. Any final points?
Chair, may I?
Oh, Jan.
Sorry, can I just make one comment on the single person discount? Members may recall that the idea of abolishing the single person discount was floated last summer by the government. In the end, they decided not to proceed with that at that time. But I think it is likely that some reform is going to resurface in the context of a wider reset of council tax. And I think we'll have to wait and see what emerges from that review. But it does cost us a significant amount of money. It's a significant leakage from our council tax revenues every year, and I do think that some change is likely to come. So in the meantime, we will continue, I think, to focus on single person discount as part of our counter fraud strategy. But I would just agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Reid's comments about the other council tax exemptions and the new liabilities around empty properties and holiday homes. That is something that we will need to consider building into our plans going forwards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, I think, Stuart.
Yeah, it's just a quick one, if I may, Chair. Yeah, the data on page 201 are very instructive, very informative. If I may, Chair, some of the financial amounts, they would inflate anyway, would they not? I don't want to create extra work for the team here. They're clearly very busy and actually doing their job. I wonder if some volume-based data might be more useful. Perhaps the second point, if I may, Chair, just quickly, perhaps of more importance, given what we've heard from those with an elected mandate. How do the team ensure that they've focused very scarce and potentially very powerful resources? How do we ensure that we align the effort that's being put in here to the priorities as set by elected members? What's the process by which we do that?
That's a very good question. Who's going to answer it for us?
I'll go first. I'll go first. Chair, thank you. Thank you. That is a good question. Thank you. I think, as the committee will remember, we brought a corporate fraud risk assessment to you as the committee last March, as part of, exactly as you say, Dr. Green, about we are a finite team. We only have so many resources. How do we target that in the right place? So a lot of that work, which Amy led on, was probably driving at exactly the principle of what you're asking about. How do we target that resource where we're going to get the most efficient use of our team? I think then, on a case-by-case basis, what we've introduced over the previous 12 to 18 months is a bit of a triage system, so that where we get referrals in, we're looking at, okay, what may this cost us to investigate? What may we potentially recover? And how does this fit with the resource we've got, our wider strategy and so on, to then determine how we prioritise the work that we do almost on a day-to-day basis. So I think between the two, unless there's anything that Amy can think of to add that I haven't mentioned, I think that's probably how I would answer that question in terms of a top-level strategy approach, but then also on a day-to-day basis on each case. Thank you.
Right. It's an interesting one, though, because it's. I think there were two parts to Stuart's question. One of which, so the triage point is well made, but it's also, is there a line of sight between the aspirations of the council and the anti-fraud policy? But we can perhaps reflect on that.
Yes, if I could. Thank you, Chair. There's, there's probably not a direct link like that, though we obviously do take cognizance of the council plan objectives in sort of everything we do. Whether they are explicitly referenced in the anti-fraud policy or our counter-fraud risk assessment, I wouldn't like to say sat here now, but certainly something we take away, and the next time we review those, make sure that that's a bit more explicit.
Okay.
Can I just add as well, the corporate enforcement review as well, which Stephen mentioned earlier as part of BEST. I think that is going to have a much more sort of strategic view of enforcement across the council, and where we will feed into that, so they'll have a little bit more of a steer as well, potentially.
Okay. Final question from Councillor Oliver.
Just rolling back to the housing lists and the housing allocations, there's also a review going on of the housing allocation policy, and I just wanted to make sure that you guys were involved in that, and because it's not just about the actual policies, it's also about the data and the systems that we need to be able to implement those policies properly. And Home Finder as a system has been in existence and not changed since 2002. And as the policies change, that system could become more robust. You could collect more information that would allow you to do data matching and so on. And so you are involved.
Question.
So, sorry, yes, yes, and I know. I think there's the report to scrutiny around that as well, isn't it? Is that this afternoon as well? Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, we are aware, and obviously Amy's in kind of fairly regular contact with housing colleagues. So, yeah.
Okay. Good. Right. So, I mean, anti-fraud is, in terms of the Constitution, the Audit Committee has a particular interest and a particular accountability. So what we've had particularly is some positive comments on the Home Finder project in particular, and some discussion and some points around the single person discount and the need to focus on that, which I think was Councillor Reid, your first point, and then the second point went on into the holiday homes and the need. That's a potential area. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, Amy, thank you for that. And I think one of the things that we should do is book you a slot so that at some point in the next sort of 6 months we have another one of those online seminars with the Audit Committee, because I think the last one was very helpful. Yeah. Okay. Anything else we need to do on that? Otherwise, I'm going to move us on, because we're a little bit ahead of time, but no pressure there, Kevin. Reports. So we've got the strategic audit plan, and this is the interim monitoring statement.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Hopefully the committee are sort of used to this report coming to you now in the format and so on. But this is an update on the strategic audit plan for 24-25, which we originally brought to Audit Committee for approval in March 24. And this is a position statement as at the end of December, or at the end of the third quarter of the year. On page 208 and 209 of the papers, there's just sort of some summary information in terms of the statistics and sort of information around the plan as we normally provide. And then on page 213 onwards, we just take the plan which was originally agreed back in March and just give an update and position statement in terms of the current status of each of those pieces of work. Obviously, there have been changes to the plan as originally envisaged in March, which is normal. It would be strange to complete your audit plan exactly as you originally intended. Some of those changes we sort of give an idea of in terms of on page 208, and then obviously that's reflected in the updated table attached as the appendix. Again, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions from the committee.
So we as a committee are being asked to consider the progress which Mr MacDonald has outlined for us. Are there any queries? I had a quick question on the limited assurance on cyber security. How are we doing on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, that was, I'm just thinking when, so did we say that? I know that's been recently concluded. I don't know when we wrote the report. Forgive me, Chair, just what it, yes, so I believe the cybersecurity was concluded. Yes, yes. So that was concluded with a limited assurance report. I think in line with all limited assurance reports, Chair, these remain a focus of the executive management team. So when I every 2 months take an update report into the executive management team, and one of the things we include on that are any report which received a limited assurance report, and that is kept in full sight of all of the executive directors, and Helen, the chief executive, regularly draws attention to those lists and to keep the directors to account and make sure that the recommended actions are being taken, etc. In terms of the specifics around that particular audit, I probably couldn't say this. It would be for sort of IT to provide that answer, but I am assured that we have measures in place to be on top of kind of where we have limited assurance reports, that these are followed up accordingly and in due.
No, that's fine. And I think I read, and I can't remember where I read it, that there's a revisit for 25, 26. So keeping the focus on that. Yeah.
I think given the risk that it, and it obviously features as a corporate risk in its own right. So yes, we'll keep that in sight, Chair.
Okay. Any other? Councillor Doe.
At this time, I did want just to say one, which is the limited assurance, which goes back quite a long time. So I was bringing it as part of the programme, which is ongoing, so with treasury management, etc., etc. It's the Capital Programme Management Arrangements Limited Assurance. And I know there was quite a lot of work that was going on about that, and there's quite a lot of money involved and things like that. So it was just, is that ongoing, and when would we, whether the limited assurance is still there, or in what position is that actually in, because it is an important one, because we've got such big projects going forward. I just wanted to know where, have you got the page for that? It's on the page 1. It's the second paragraph down, programme assurance.
Which page is that, Anne? Page?
Well, you've got, it's the, sorry?
Which page is that?
It's page 1 of the Q3 progress report.
Oh, Right.
It's a bit like saying, I think yours is down at the bottom with the cyber, Peter.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So yes, on the report, which is on page 213.
Sorry, 250.
Yeah, so we sort of say that we've concluded a capital programme management arrangements audit which received a limited assurance opinion. So again, I guess the comments that are made around cyber would apply in a general sense to that as well. It's then something that we would then consider as part of our risk assessment for next year's audit plan, whether we then revisit that. Obviously, what we have to be mindful of is the time that's sometimes needed to implement recommendations.
Yes.
And we have to then leave enough time for recommendations to be implemented and have an effect before we would then see any change in the...
Yes, there's no point in going in and doing another audit if you haven't
too early,
given them
because
the
then
chance.
you would get...
Absolutely, yes.
Exactly.
I just wanted to know where we were and how far it was going ahead, because obviously it does have, you know, whether it's value for money, but it will have an impact along the road. So we need to be assured that everything are improvements being made, and that there's a clear audit trail.
Agree, Chair, and I think probably in two strands where we follow up on individual recommendations. We're doing that as part of that work, and then without spoiling the surprise of the next agenda item, as we're starting to put our plan together for next year, part of the discussions we will be having is, so what are the arrangements now? Is it an optimum time to do that again, or do we need to give more time as part of sort of that risk and assessment for the plan for next year?
Thank you.
Okay. Right, so committee, we've had a discussion on the progress that Kevin's outlined for us, some specific questions on where there are limited assurance and what's then happens, which is helpful. So we're just noting the report. Agreed? Yep. And then we're moving on to the plans, i.e. the preparation of the strategic audit plan for 25-26. Is that the one where we have an online discussion at some point?
Yes, Chair.
Yes,
so,
right, okay. Over to you.
So yes, so we bring this report to committee every January, just outlining the fact that, as was sort of already mentioned, I will be bringing the 25-26 plan to you in March for approval. And this report just sets out the approach that we will be adopting in terms of how we pull that plan together, which will then, as I say, be presented to committee in March. There are no real changes to the report from previous years. The only thing I would mention, which again, not spoiling the surprise of the next agenda item, is the introduction of the global internal audit standards, which do put a slight change in terms of some of the requirements that I needed to follow. Not really in terms of what we will do, the wording is just slightly different. But we will sort of recognise that as well. But that's really the only change. Part of the reason for bringing the report to you as a committee, Chair, as you quite rightly mentioned, is obviously as a key or the main stakeholder, if you like, in terms of internal audit's work, is to highlight this to you as a committee to think about whether there are any items which you think I should consider for inclusion in the plan. And as you rightly say, Chair, we do a session every year, and I would envisage doing exactly the same session with committee members where we can talk through the risk assessment, how that's gone, and then pick up any specific areas which audit committee have at that point.
Okay, so I think it's helpful if we don't have to think up those points now.
No,
we do not.
But it's to offer that invitation again to the committee to then to pick that up.
The invitation sounds. So we'll fix the time that as many of us can make as possible. Yes. Okay. So again, committee, we're happy with the preparations that Kevin is making for the strategic audit plan for 25-26. Yep. And then we come to the global internal audit standards, and there are 5 domains and 15 principles and 52 something else, 52 standards. So you're going to take us through all that, are you? Good.
I can if you like, Chair, but I think I'd spare you that bit. Chair, this is obviously, I guess that it is what it says it is. It's just kind of making you as a committee aware of these changes which are coming. I know we've sort of talked a little bit about it in previous meetings, but obviously just as a committee to be fully aware of certainly some of the implications of this. As you rightly sort of say, there are a number of principles and standards and domains which are nicely summarised in the image on page 228. And then at paragraph 4.4, there are just some key differences which I outlined for Audit Committee's attention. I think I won't propose to go through them all unless there are any specific questions around those. But I think one of the key things that I would point out, and about the sort of the 39 essential conditions which I've attached at the appendix as well, is that there aren't really any changes in the requirements of the new standards to the existing ones. I think all of those things are still done and are a matter of course. It's just, I think these new standards are taking the standard of internal audit delivery and applying it for all sectors globally. Whereas I think the local government sector in the UK is already at a pretty high level. And these standards are about bringing all of the sectors globally up to that level. So whilst there may be some slight changes in terminology or in responsibility, I don't think there's much change in terms of the requirements. So to take an example, if I may, Chair, I am required to prepare an internal audit charter, as the Audit Committee will be aware, and I am required to bring that to Audit Committee to have it approved by you, which we do. We will still have to do that under the new standards, but it becomes Audit Committee's responsibility to approve a charter prepared by me, rather than my responsibility to prepare it and have it approved by you. So it doesn't change what actually happens, it's just changing the responsibility, if you like, from me to you. But in essence, nothing will really change. We'll still do the same process. So there are some sort of minor tweaks. So in terms of splitting the internal audit charter, it now has to become a mandate and a charter. But the items which have to go into the mandate are already within the internal audit charter, so it's more cosmetic. We do have to now formalise an internal audit strategy, which is a little bit different, but again, nothing too onerous. And I think the fact that professional courage and professional scepticism are now mandated. I would say an internal audit team in the land that doesn't do that already isn't really delivering full stop. So again, I've got no worries over those requirements. It's just how they are formally demonstrable rather than already being in place, essentially. But happy to take any questions, Chair. As I say, we will bring a full update report to March ahead of those going live in April, but again, happy to take any questions.
Okay, I'm going to go Councillor Reid and Councillor Day.
Yeah, I don't want to drag this out because I realise we do have more important business to discuss, but I was just wondering, when it says global, I mean, do the Russians follow this? Do the Chinese follow this? Does all of Africa follow this? Does all of South America follow this? Or is actually this just really kind of like a European, US, Canada kind of thing? Because if it is, then I think they're overstepping the mark calling it global, because I can't imagine that it actually is.
Can you answer that one?
Thank you, Chair. I think that's maybe a question for the sort of the Global Institute of Internal Auditors rather than myself. I take your comments, Councillor Reid. I think the idea is that wherever you are in the world, these would be the standards that it would be expected to follow. Clearly, in more developed countries, there's going to be more adherence to these. But I think the idea is that wherever you are in the world, these are the standards which would be applicable. And then clearly there are then sector-specific guidance will come in as well. On top of that.
It's not enforceable, actually. We're volunteering, sorry. I'll be quiet.
It is the law in this country. So the Accounts and Audit Regulations 2015 state we must follow guidance and procedures and best practice in place at the time. This is that guidance. So at the moment it's a public sector internal audit standard, so I have to follow that by law. I will then have to follow these by law.
Right. So it applies.
Under,
Right.
yeah.
Councillor Dow, closer to home.
Us as the audit committee to give assurance that you are doing that. I just want to know where this comes in, who's the enforcement, is it external audit? Or are we as members or the audit committee asked to actually give assurance of it?
Initially this was an information report for you as audit committee to know that this is coming. So committee will recall that every 5 years under the public sector internal audit standards, we were required to have an external quality assessment, which we did 12 months ago. That requirement doesn't change under the new standards, but I would imagine that when that external assessment comes along, they won't just be asking me for the evidence of adherence. I suspect there may then be the asking of audit committee to provide the assurance as part of that rather than just me. So there may be a slight tweak in that respect. What I envisage doing when I bring that more detailed report to you in March is here's an assessment of all the requirements and how we think we are against that, which we've done previously under the old public sector internal audit standards. So I would envisage doing that under the new standards to you in March for you to then consider and take that assurance in March. But this was almost a this is coming for your information, and I'll bring a full update in March.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And that's helpful because I think, as you said, Kevin, just now, this, and as Anne, you were alluding to, I mean, this puts a responsibility on the committee to satisfy itself that you, as we believe you are demonstrating things like professional courage and so on. Yeah.
Exactly, and I think that to use that example, Chair, one of the things which are taxing myself and kind of my colleagues up and down the country is how you demonstrate and evidence that.
Yes.
So I have no doubt that we have to have the courage of our convictions. If we have to have a difficult conversation, we have to have that difficult conversation. How you evidence that you've considered that is a matter that we're still thinking about.
Yeah.
You can obviously kind of evidence where it's happened, but if it hasn't happened, how you demonstrate the need that you've thought about it and there wasn't a need, we're still sort of considering.
Right. I can see nods from various auditors and people interested in audit thinking about this. Right. Well, we won't continue that at this point. We're just noting, as you say, that this global internal audit standard is coming down the line, and it applies to the UK, so it applies to Northumberland. Right. I think that's the end of your stint, Kevin, and Diane, we now invite you to give an external audit progress report. And thank you for being so patient with us.
Thank you, Chair. Very short progress report. Like I mentioned, the detail will come to the next audit committee on the progress on the 23-24 audit. The headline messages at the moment, subject to completion of remaining work, are an unqualified opinion on the accounts and no significant recommendations in respect of our VFM work. And I'm not going to say any more on that because it would spoil the report when you'll get it on the 17th. And we've just got the revised accounts last night, so I'm desperate to get back to my accounts, my happy place. There are also a couple of national publications in the report talking about the pressures in the local market, which may be of interest. Happy to take any questions, Chair. I'm not going to go into any more detail at this stage.
I mean, and the lines of communication and the cooperation is good, and it's, yeah.
Very good. We're very grateful to the finance team to help us get to this stage. Obviously, the budget's been the big pressure this month, and alongside that, finalising the accounts has really not been ideal timing for the team, but they've done it. And their reward will be that they get to move on and do another set of accounts this year.
It's routine.
Is that it?
That's it.
That's it, right, okay. Okay, any questions for Mazars? Nope. But it sounds encouraging. Thank you for that. Right. I think that brings us to the action log, which is quite short because we've made progress on a number of the actions that were sticking. So I'm just going to say, are there any, unless there's any particular queries on any of the actions, and otherwise we'll move through that and then go into the private session. Anne, questions on the action log?
Action list, please. There's two, which I know we get the ones for the education, so we get any reports back on education outside, all the reports we get. So we'll get obviously the adult services report will come back here. It's been, so all the reporting comes back here, which is great because we've always kept an eye. There's two reports that I asked for, which one was the remuneration panel report, and I think a lot of us took part in that at the end of last year. That really hasn't come to anybody. It hasn't come to full council.
It's not the job of this committee.
But is there any possibility alongside that could be looked at by the audit committee as part of the reporting? And the other one, fine. No, it's fine if you don't say no. The other one was we had a peer review last year, and that hasn't been reported to council either. So it's a matter of where these reports are going to, where members can actually see them. But the fact that we are under the agreed by the audit committee that we would carry on looking at following colour, all the challenge board and everything else, that we would look at those reports. And it's all there minuted and agreed by the council. So I'm not worried about the remuneration particularly, but the peer review, as we are meant to be the accountable body to have a look at any reports coming in. It's all there minuted, it's all there agreed. When
I thought the peer review, the follow-up came to full council.
It did.
Last week.
It did.
Yes, but it's meant to come to audit as well.
No, it's been to full council. There's no point in it coming here.
It's agreed. It's part of the. I mean, we can have it. I'm not.
Yeah.
You know, it's all there agreed. I think Kevin, you'll remember we've had all the reports that have come through. So we looked at the challenge report. We had. It's all there, and it's if you go back to the FAST reports, and these reports coming through and based on colour and the original report. So if we can have a look at that, that's fine. If you don't want to do that, but I think it's something that I would like to say that was part of what was agreed originally. And the other one was the best reports. Be interesting to know how many best reports we are actually receiving.
Okay, I think what we should do, Anne, is
absolutely whatever.
Is can you drop that shopping list to Andrea, and then we'll see how we can take it forward. And some of it, I don't think we can take forward because I think it's beyond the remit of this committee.
Remuneration kind of fine. Yeah, but the others, yes.
Okay, right. Any other comments on the action log? Otherwise, we're going to say that there's no urgent business that I've been made aware of. So the date of the next meeting, and this is a single agenda item meeting where Diane, you will be front and centre of and that's the extra meeting scheduled for the end of February, and that's an important one in terms of quoracy, if I can make that plea to members. Right, that's the end of the meeting in that sense, and so we're going to have to ask you to leave. thank you for attending. And we're moving to part 2. Are we agreed that we should exercise the powers to move into closed session?
It's only if they need,